Hey, listeners, it's Jenn. As the year draws to an end, I wanted to take a moment to say thank you. This year, What Are You Listening To has grown and changed and brought so many amazing people and songs into my life. I'm so grateful that you take the time to listen each week, and I can't wait to bring you season 4. Please enjoy these outtakes and extended conversations with some of this season's most interesting guests. Hi, listeners. It's Jenn Tully, and I am back to do some deep tracks conversation with Asher Laub. Asher, I had so many more questions for you than my 30-minute show would allow. So thank you for agreeing to have a little bit more of a conversation with me. But I would love to know, just we talked a little bit about all your classical training and kind of how you fell into music at a really early age. What sort of I guess, drove you to choose this as a career rather than just a hobby? Or, so often you hear about kids that were pushed into music early and they either love it or they hate it. And as soon as they don't have to play anymore, they put it aside. What really made you think this is it. This is what I want to do.
So I was in that group where I was thinking like, wow, this is really tough. But I had the benefit of starting very, very young and probably about 19, about 17 years of playing before I hit the New York scene when I went to college.
Mhm.
So I didn't really choose the career. It sort of chose me because it was paying my bills as I was working my way through undergrad. And there was demand for my unique skills, which is sight reading and improvising, and just I had a pretty long list of songs that I just knew by heart that were relevant to the club date scene, whatever. Um, so that's pretty much how I chose the career. I actually tried to leave the career and I came back. I tried to leave twice. I got 2 other degrees at NYU and then I came back to it, um, believe it or not. And here I am today, many years later, still
And
still playing music.
did your parents push you into violin, or did you just when you were a kid, you're like, this is something I want to do?
My mother says that I looked up to my older brother and said I want to do that because he was playing concertos, 6 years older than me. I maybe that happened. I don't know, but
Yeah.
my mother definitely facilitated this career without choosing it, without wanting me to go in that direction because just all the private lessons she gave. She worked out. She arranged for me.
Yeah.
Um, and once I had started to make a career, it made them really nervous actually. And even as I
Oh.
was like playing major venues, flying all over the country, they're like, still not a good idea. And but now they finally sort of now 20 years later, they sort of come around to realize that this is really the best thing for me. And I understand their resistance. I understand their concern. It's not something that I would have. I think I would have had the same reservations if it were my kid. Um,
Yeah.
we're talking back in the 80s, 90s. Music
Right.
is not considered like a stable type of job, especially performance. More or less, teaching is, but not so much performance. Um, it's working out for me, and hopefully for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, thank goodness. Thank goodness you're doing it. I'm glad you are. And I
I lost
also
you there.
this question fascinated me too, just in terms of being someone that has so many different skill sets. Not only like you said, do you read and write music, you're a great improviser. You can obviously play multiple instruments, you produce, you also dance during some of your performances, which I find amazingly cool. I love that part. But so what are you most proud of in your musical accomplishments? Like you do so many things. Like what is there one thing that you're like, that's kind of my crowning moment though, or that's what I'm most proud of?
Um, I have to think about that. I think generally it's like a, this broader picture, forest for the trees type of approach of like I'm proud of the effort that I've made to make this career work, sort of thing,
Yeah.
as opposed to like one. I guess I could say, hey, I'm proud of co-headlining some major venues, like you mentioned, like Carnegie Hall, whatever. Um,
Yeah.
playing for various celebrities, PBS. I guess I'm most proud of different pieces that I've produced, including some pieces that have yet to be released that I will not release until they're in film. They're going to sit on a shelf right now on my website if you want to check it out. But They're going to sit on a shelf until somebody picks them up. But yeah, like I'm proud of just Neon Dreams kind of writing itself in my brain, and I'm proud of like Atlantis. These are songs that I wouldn't have really envisioned being able to produce and create. So yeah, they're like my little babies.
Yeah, well, I would imagine. I often, when I'm talking to musicians, I'll say that. I'll often ask the question when they're bringing songs to the show, like, was it hard for you to only, choose 2 songs or 4 songs, whatever the case may be? Because it must be like asking you to pick a favorite child when I say, like, you only get 4. So
Yeah.
I would think that they would all kind of feel like children because you birthed them literally, like from your mind onto the paper and into everybody's ears.
Well, I don't want to insult any of the individual songs. I don't want to play favorites, but I do play favorites. I have a preference.
Well, I always say that I play favorites with my kids too, but I only have one, so
Okay, that's a good
she's the
one.
one and only, always the favorite.
That's a good one.
Well, I guess just sort of to wrap up our deep track session here, I know that there are lots of folks listening that either have some sort of passion towards music or they love it, but like you said, it feels like a scary career or a scary leap to make. What advice do you have for other aspiring musicians that are thinking like, is this something that I really want to try? Do you say like, quit your day job and go all in? Do you say like, well, you gotta, it has to feel like it's the only thing you can do or don't do it? Like sort of what is your advice to folks that are thinking about pursuing music as a career?
So, as like a practical minded person with a family, so I have a lot of responsibilities. I got a mortgage to pay. Like I can't take significant risks, but I can take some risks. I wouldn't
Mhm.
recommend. I wouldn't want to be responsible for recommending that somebody just completely, jump off the deep end and just throw everything away and throw away their degrees. If they don't see evidence that they could earn a living. Um, Usually it helps to dip a toe in, which is what I did throughout my college career. And I saw that it was working over many years. And then I made it a full time career. I would recommend something like that, even whether it's over a couple of years, part time jobbing, something else, just having a side hustle. And then you take little risks over time, and you sort of augment the amount of time that you're dedicating to either producing or performing, and you cut back on maybe the work that the side hustle. So that would be my recommendation. If you're really passionate about it, then go for it, because we're talking many decades of, you can either choose to be happy or unhappy. Obviously, everything's a trade off, and sometimes it's worth taking that risk for like a greater gain. And for me, I think that it was a good choice, but it wasn't always apparent for I'm going to say the last 6 years.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, I said it was our last question, and here I go. This is so Jen, right? To just keep on talking. But
Mhm.
I imagine it's changed too. Like it's got to be different from like the 90s and early 2000s versus now, where streaming is everywhere and it's easier, at least again, from a non musician standpoint, it seems like it's easier to get your music out there and get it heard because you don't have to deal with some of the traditional distribution channels and gatekeepers that we did back in the old days of CDs and cassettes and things like that. So I feel like it does feel like it's a little bit more accessible, but that also makes it maybe even a little bit scarier because it is more accessible. Anybody can do it. Anybody. I'm air quoting.
Well, it's interesting. You make a really important point, and I think that the landscape is somewhat of a mirage. So the idea that anybody can do it, uh, well, anybody could do it, yeah, if they put forth the effort and they have the right strategies in place. You need a business model, you need a business strategy, business mindset, and you have to understand that your fans are your clients, really, um,
Hmm.
which most people don't really see it that way. And data driven, um, you got to crunch data, just like any job. It's a job. It is a job, just like
Yeah.
being a nurse or doctor or whatever. Um, and it's a lot of hours. And um, I, I don't, I, to answer your question directly, I don't think that it's wise to assume that because all these platforms are accessible and anybody can just pump out music, that's really the case. And that's what I mean by a mirage, because you can produce a lot of music that nobody's going to hear, and it's going to be on all the major platforms, but nobody's going to be listening to it. And that's what the tricky situation is. You have to attract people to the music, and that takes work.
Yeah. Well, I
Equity
like
work.
that you're putting a really like practical approach on it too, right? Like you have to look at the data. Like that's like the flip side of it, right? Like maybe we didn't have the data as accessible. We had gatekeepers telling us what was good and what wasn't. Now we don't necessarily have the gatekeepers in a traditional sense, but yeah, you have the data. You have to look at the numbers. You have to look at what is what's working and what isn't among your fans. I also like your notion of, you know, the fans being the clients. That's I think that's kind of a new approach too to making music based on the way distribution models are working these days too.
Yeah, I would agree. And I just want to mention that the gatekeepers still exist, but they just sort of have shifted to a different setting, and it doesn't
Okay.
seem they're sort of behind. It's not as apparent that those gatekeepers exist. You know, Spotify is a gatekeeper. Playlists are gatekeepers. YouTube, like these social media platforms, and then curators are gatekeepers. So it's a complex game. It's a much more
Yeah.
complex game than it used to be, but also there's more opportunities for more artists to be in the field. So that's a good thing.
That's so cool. Thank you for sharing that perspective. I'm always interested not only in the music side of it, but sort of the business side of making music. And again, as a consumer, it's interesting to me to think about how musicians come to my ears, you know? And so hearing your take on it, I think is an interesting one and a different one from somebody who is classically trained and has had so many major experiences and successes in terms of performance venues and coverage and collaborators and things like that. So I love it. Thank you
Thank you.
so much, Asher, for giving me a little extra time here on Deep Tracks. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure, and thanks for having me on.
All right. Thanks. And listeners, if you want to learn more about Asher, you can find his website at asherlaub.com. That's asherlaub.com. No, I think like so we're at Deep Tracks here. I'm talking to Andrew Cloninger again, and we're talking about his fighting words for Matt Sidholm about Bob Seger being better than Bruce Springsteen, and we're talking about why. And I think it's kind of boiled down to authenticity, right? We kind of agreed that it feels a little bit like Bruce is assuming a character, whereas Bob
Absolutely.
Seger feels like he's like sharing like lived experience,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's so true. Like, you know, like we were talking about, like, turn the page. It's like he's walked into a cafe and people have turned their heads on him. Like that is
Yes.
a legit experience that he's had on the road. And like I love in that song where he's talking about, smoking the day's last cigarette and he's got ringing in his ears. Like
Mm-hmm.
that is a real thing. Like that is so, like, especially during that time, the sound systems were terrible. Like
Yeah.
like all they would have through a sound system was your vocals, and your, that's why they had so many guitar amplifiers. And so like that's why all those dudes are deaf,
Right.
because because you're talking like 6 or 7 100 watt amps roaring, to fill up the stadium, and
Yeah.
like it's a, it took a toll on those guys, and but they did it because they loved it, and they would do it again. and and,
And you
and
get
that's the
that
thing.
with, I feel like with Bob Seger, you get that desperation too. Like we were
Yeah,
also talking about the song like Hollywood Nights, where like
yeah,
like the details are so specific and
yeah.
the feelings are so he's relaying them so directly and accurately that you feel like this must be shared experience. This isn't
It's
something
journalism.
that, yeah, it really it is. It's like him writing like autobiographically about his life and experience, not I'm going to assume this like, you know, I'm singing for the working man or the common
Yeah,
man or whatever. It feels like he really is sharing with you these stories of where he grew up and time and place and the people that he met and the things he experienced. So I'm with you. I don't think it's a stretch. I think we need to start a new movement that it's okay to say you like
yeah.
Bob Seger. more
Yeah,
than
like a
Bruce
rock, man.
Springsteen. It's not just for Chevy commercials
Yeah,
or
right,
whatever.
right. Well, and I think for me too, it was funny because that was the big campaign when I was a kid. The Like a Rock campaign, and
Yeah.
I had no idea. And my dad's like, "Oh, that's Bob Seger," like kind of like dismissive, like he sold out,
Right.
And then I was like, "Well, how many times has Bruce Springsteen sold out?" Like
Right.
all the time. That dude will shill anything, and
Right.
and not necessarily like and it's more like cultural cachet, but like he definitely is a shill. And so like it's really funny to me because Bob Seger to me has like he's actually counting the money, like
Yeah.
it's kind of funny how that works because but and he's also not 75 and like trying to do like guitar slides on the stage and breaking your knees.
That sounds dangerous.
Although Bruce Springsteen's in really good shape for being in his 70s, I have to give him that. But
Yes. Yes.
but it's I don't know. Like for me, I think the musicality thing is the thing that I turn to because there's no getting around Bob Seger's voice and his like arrangements of the songs and the songwriting and like it's just head and shoulders above what Bruce is doing. He just didn't get the recognition, I think. And being like I said, there's something in the water over in Michigan because you got guys like this. You get the Stooges and you get the
Yeah.
MC5, but then you also get Bob Seger, and so it's like this
Yeah.
whole thing. And then those three bands make a baby, and it's called Kid Rock. You know what I mean? Like, unfortunately,
Right.
that's what we get. Or you get the White Stripes. Which for my money, the White Stripes are the greatest rock band of all time. And
I
and like
completely agree with
and
you. I
like
love Jack White.
yeah, Jack White is in a room with a guitar. Look out. Like I always love that.
It might get loud. Is that what you're thinking of? The
That's cool,
documentary?
but like that's really cool. But like I love that one where they had to cancel the country guy on SNL. It was Morgan Wallen.
Oh, Morgan Wallen. Yeah.
And so who do they call? Jack White. And
Jack
then
White.
Jack White comes on and shreds. He just like
Yeah.
destroys the stage. Like, what else do you want? Like, this is rock and roll. Like, no rehearsal. Let's just do this thing live. And like he rips.
And so prolific too. Talk about
Ah,
another person that like can't keep from cranking out music, whether it's, side projects like the
yeah.
Raconteurs or like, it's something else, him launching a new artist. Like I think they're married now, Olivia Jean, his new wife.
Oh yeah.
Like so many different things. And I love his live shows are just insane.
Yeah.
Like that, what was it called? His Blunderbuss album that was his solo. I mean, there's just so much
Killer.
great stuff too. You cannot argue. So definitely something in the water in Michigan or the greater Detroit area. We also have to, I mean, we can't talk about the Detroit music scene without mentioning Eminem also. Like
Oh,
I
yeah,
feel like
yeah.
you like genius again,
Yeah.
talking about somebody that just is like sharing lived experience with words that are magic. And you've got someone like a Bob Seger who's using these really like descriptive storytelling words.
Yeah.
You've got someone like Eminem who's rapping but no less a wordsmith and
Oh,
like a
100%.
vernacular like nobody's business. Like I just think that that's one of the hardest forms of music to make. Like we were talking about in the main show about like freestyling or
Yeah.
scatting at the end. Like I just can't imagine those rap battles, like
Oh.
getting up there. I'd be like,
I'd be terrified.
well, 1 second, please, while I think of a rhyme for spaghetti, right? Like,
And then you gotta slam the guy a little bit too. So it's like
Yeah.
trying to come up with a good slam as well as be lyrical about it. And it's like, wow,
insane.
that's way
So,
too
but
much.
it's like when people are like, I don't like rap or I can't listen to rap, that I'm like, well,
Hey.
you're like, that's fine. You don't have to love it, but to say it's not a viable, valid, extremely
Yeah.
difficult form of music to make is just, I think, silliness.
Well,
Like,
and I
that's
think
just-
too, like, because I came up, my era was like De La Soul and like
yes,
Fuji's and like
So
like
good.
really great, Biggie, Tupac, all that stuff.
Mhm.
Like you talk about lyricism and you're talking about those guys were sampling like R&B, like Clyde Stubblefield, who's the drummer for James Brown, and like they were like taking and talking about Detroit, you can't talk about Detroit without Motown, and like
Right, of course.
and like Marvin Gaye, James Jamerson, the bass player, like Babbitt, he's another, and like all those guys were, Stevie Wonder. I mean,
All of it.
all that was like, you can't, another guy, John Lee Hooker is another,
Oh,
Detroit guy. I mean, he was
so good.
transplant, but he didn't go through Chicago. He came through Detroit, and you could definitely tell because he looks like he sounds like he's gonna cut a guy, and that's that menacing, leather jacket Detroit thing, that rhythm thing that even the Stooges kind of stole from,
Just
and
hard Scrabble, like you feel like you're getting like this
Factories.
lived, like gritty experience
Oh
that
yeah, man.
that always
Yeah.
feels legit. It doesn't feel manufactured. Like some of the
No.
like I feel like sometimes like some of the New York bands, like it
Yeah.
still feels glossy,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like it's gritty, but there still is like a gloss or a sheen. Whereas Detroit, it's just stripped down, it's raw, whether it's the
Yeah.
White Stripes or whether it's Eminem or whether it's Bob Seger or whether it's John Lee Hooker. It
Yeah.
feels just really raw and
Yeah.
so close to the surface to me.
It's visceral, and like, and the other thing too is like, they made Motown records in a basement, like
Yeah. And
like
some of the best records of all
all
time.
time, like you cannot, like, that's the DIY. I mean, it was an independent, Motown was an independent label that, like, they changed the world with
Yes.
all the crazy, Marvin Gaye and the Supremes, and I mean, you name them. I mean, it's like
Yeah.
hit after hit after hit, and like all of it good, and like, and their studio band was a bunch of jazz guys,
Yeah.
that could play, and it was like killers, all of them, and like that's what I love about all that stuff is like, all you have to have is vision, and I think sometimes that gets lost in like the, in the, Dua Lipa, conversation, or whatever you want to call it, the Lizzo conversation, like, the I mean, not knocking them, but like it's not that.
It's different.
It's paid promotion, and like, and there's nothing wrong with it, but and they might have something to say. It's just they're not saying it to me.
Right. Right.
That music's not. I always say it like, sometimes people ask me, "Oh, what do you think about Taylor Swift, or this or that?" And I'm like, it's not made for me, and it's cool.
Yeah.
And I love Jack Antonoff. I think he's a great producer, and he's a great musician, and Fun is great, Bleachers is great, and he's doing great work with her, and the National's great. They did some great work with her.
Yeah.
And like, it's just, it doesn't, Paramore to me is way more interesting to me than that, and it's cool, but it's just, it's not made for me, and that's cool, and that's
And
fine.
I think that's the magic too, right? Like,
Yeah.
we can acknowledge somebody has talent or they're a great artist,
yeah.
and I never want to listen to them, right? Like, I
Yeah,
mean,
it's
I have this
cool.
conversation a lot about the band Rush, right?
Oh yeah.
I can't stand Rush, right? I'd rather chew
Yeah.
broken glass than listen to Rush, but
Right.
I'll never say they're a bad band. I'll never
Can't.
diss somebody for liking them, right? Because
Right.
yes, the talent is there. They
Mhm.
are one of the most gifted set of musicians to form a band and step on a stage. Like, I understand all of that, and they make my ears bleed. Like, I do not
Right.
want to have anything
Yep.
to do with Rush. And so that's always the way I sort of approach it. Like, yeah, not for me,
Yep.
and like would not dismiss that person's artistic
Right.
ability or whatever, just
No.
not for me.
It's and that, that kind of goes for me. It's like listening to like some of the pop music, but also like some of the prog music is like, oof, like, yes, I'm like, I can't get through it. Like, like I can listen to Roundabout and like some of that stuff, but like we're getting into deep cuts and Fragile. I'm like, okay, like,
Right.
I get it. We're doing 5 different time signatures, like impossible chords. I get it. I don't
We're gonna
want,
be
we're singing about dragons. I don't, it's not for me. It's not for me. Like, I get the folklore, King Crimson's kind of like that too. Like, there's sometimes I really like King, I think it depends on the era for King Crimson for me, but like most of it, I'm just like, yeah, I
and you
get
get
it, but I
Moody
don't love
Blues
it.
too. Like when you talk about dragons, I think of Moody Blues.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
they've got some dragon stuff happening there. And then what's funny though, and then all of these musicians have kids, and then their kids form bands that
Oh,
are
I
like I
know.
think of like Group Love, right? Like
Yeah,
then
yeah.
you get like these spin-offs where you can tell like, oh, maybe their mom and dad were prog rockers back in the day.
Well, and it's like, that's an impossible task. Like,
Yeah.
to be the son of a musician, like, and especially somebody like, you know, that's like really prominent. Like, I would hate to be like George Harrison's kid,
Right.
or like Paul McCartney's kid, or like our Sean Lennon. I love what he's doing with Les Claypool. Like that is great. Like that to me is almost like Beatle music. This is like what like the most interesting Beatle music you could ever hear. In some ways,
Wow.
because it's almost like you're hearing John Lennon singing over this like crazy funk thing. And
I have a personal policy to never say anything nice about Primus, so can't help you there.
I can't help you. Yeah, that's awesome.
I'm like zero, like cannot say anything nice about the band Primus.
What is your
Just
reasoning?
can't do
I want
it.
to know what your reasoning is.
I just think that they're like again for me. I know people love. My husband loves Primus.
Oh
I've seen
yeah.
Primus live actually.
Okay.
And there's just no. There's no point to Primus for me. Like I don't need that much bass. I just don't. The funky bass line. If I'm looking for a funky bass line, I'll go like listen to the Beastie Boys
Right.
or
Yep.
like there are other places I can get what Primus delivers, and I'm just like to me it's like you said talking about music that's not for you.
Yeah.
Primus is for like a 12-year-old boy.
Oh, 100%.
That is
100%.
where and that's why it's the same thing. Like, you know what? Taylor Swift is for a 12-year-old girl.
That's 100%
and so I'll listen to her all day long.
Oh yeah. Well, and that
Right?
yeah, because my wife's the same way. Like I was showing her Jerry as a race car driver,
Oh,
and she's
good
like,
Lord.
she's like, nope.
Nope. If I want to hear a song about race car driving, you know what? I'll go to Cake.
Yeah,
There we
really.
go.
I mean, yeah, the distance is probably one of the greatest, metaphor of all time, really.
Right.
Like, and that band, oh, and she loves Cake too, and I love Cake.
See?
They're so great, and like,
I can get whatever I need
yeah,
that Primus might provide in other places without listening to Primus. That's just
I
it.
love it. That's so good because it's almost like Primus is like the illegitimate son of Rush, really.
See,
Like,
so I have a type and a non-type.
Yeah. That is 100% true because, like, if trio, bass heavy, precision drums, like crazy
Yeah.
guitar, like it, it's like it's the son that Rush does not want to acknowledge.
Right. Yes. The illegitimate, the bastard, the Jon Snow
Yeah.
of the Rush verse.
It's very true.
Oh my gosh. Well, I think that's our a
Yeah.
perfect ending
Yeah, I
for
think
our
so.
conversation here. We've just decided that Primus is the Jon Snow of Rush. Like, I mean, I think our work here is done.
It's done. I think that's all we can do. I don't think you can get much higher than that.
Oh my gosh. Thank you again,
Yeah.
Andrew. This has been so much fun. I think you're definitely going to have to come back on the show at some point. Maybe
Anytime.
we'll do a whole Wilco and all of its iterations.
Oh, I would love to.
Wouldn't that be fun?
I would love
I would
it.
love to do that.
Absolutely.
All right. And we will include no Primus, no Rush, and I'll even relinquish and no Taylor Swift on our deep dive.
No triggers. No triggers, everybody.
No triggers, everyone. Well, thanks so much, Andrew.
Yeah.
I'll see you next time.
Sounds good.
Hey, listeners, it's Jenn Tully, and I am here with a Deep Tracks with my guest, Nick Morrison. So, Nick, we talked a lot about progressive rock on our episode. I've been waiting for a long time to have a prog rock show where we at least had a few songs from not only prog rock bands, but like good examples of that kind of music. And, you and I speaking offline you shared with me that that's kind of one of your favorite genres of music.
Yeah.
And so I've been dying to ask the whole time, and it just didn't come up on the main show. So I'm super excited to have you on Deep Tracks. I know that you spent, I think it was 5 years
Yeah.
around that in Japan.
Yep. Just about 5 years.
So tell me there, like when you met, new friends or met people in Japan and sort of brought up the topic of prog rock, how did that land? Are they familiar with prog rock
Oh
in
yeah.
Japan? Is it something that they love, they hate? Because I think of Japanese music as being so not proggy,
Sure,
right?
yeah.
And
Well, I mean,
so,
I think what we get a lot of in North America certainly is like the anime influence. We see a lot of that kind of cartoon stuff and a lot of the
sure.
music that's associated with that, which is mostly J-pop, right? Which is super highly produced,
Mm-hmm.
written, recorded, and produced by ensemble, by committee almost. And I've done sessions like this where you go and work, and there's actually 8 producers and like
Wow.
10 musicians, 5 of which are actually playing and another 5 of which are there to provide opinions, plus the performer and their management and their consultation team. So like the studio is super full, and that's just kind of the way that they work there. Not every single band, but like that kind of style of music for pop music. But the thing I think that we miss in North America, or that people that are really kind of into Japanese culture on that level, they forget that there's a whole host of music that we don't hear, we don't see. So jazz is super popular in Japan. Rock is super popular. 50s rock is huge in Japan still. Surf
Wow.
rock is popular in Japan. Prog rock and metal and all, like basically every genre of music has a cohort within the Japanese population that absolutely loves it. So, going back to, we were talking about Dream Theater in the main episode, but they're really their first hit, which is Pull Me Under in 91
Yeah.
or 89, 90. Anyway, around that era, it actually hit in Japan first before it hit in North America. And they were on tour in Japan supporting the record and supporting that hit when it finally went. And it did go to #1 for a time in North America, but the Japanese were the first to really glom onto it. And they've, in Japan, still, like, Marty Friedman, I don't know if you're familiar with Megadeth at all, but he left the
Yeah.
band 99, maybe 2000, and he ended up moving to Japan. And he has a full career there now as an instrumental guitar player, in that kind of metal, new wave, alt rock, prog rock kind of weird little world. And he does very, very well for himself. I've got a friend that's in Tokyo. He plays jazz flugelhorn and
Wow.
has an amazing career there. And so, yeah, it's part of the culture there where every person, it's not like a requirement. That sounds so weird to say it, but it's like, it's almost a requirement to be a whole person, to have, and I'm making a square, I should be making a circle, but it's like a requirement to be a whole person, to have like your favorite style of music, your favorite sport that you follow, your favorite hobby or activity that you do, and you have specific bands you follow and specific players that you follow, and you become a fan or a fanatic for those
Okay.
individual things. And it's a great place to be a musician, it's a great place to be a band, and it doesn't really matter what genre you're in. If you're good, you will find an audience there, and you will be supported and loved and taken care of, like, for your career.
Well, and you hear artists are always like so excited to go and tour in Japan when they
Hmm.
can, because the fans are like no other. That's what I've heard. And
Totally.
and I get a lot of like we'll get a lot of like Japanese pop, and I've been surprised by some of the stuff, not just like the hyper pop or like you were saying like the anime, but some of it that sounds like, heavily influenced by the 60s, like American 60s and
Oh, totally.
70s music, and that
Yeah.
surprised me. And so I don't know why I was surprised, or why I'm surprised to hear that, also prog rock and metal
Yeah.
and things like that have a place in Japan too. I
Yeah.
just I think, and I think it speaks to our like the accessibility of music these days, right?
Totally.
Like I grew up where the only way I was going to hear Japanese music was if somebody went to Japan and
Yeah.
went to a record store and brought back,
Right.
a CD or an album or whatever. And now you just have the whole world at your fingertips in
Yeah.
terms of like streaming and listening. And so you are having this really cool moment where music from everywhere is kind of meshing and
Oh, totally.
influencing, and people are picking up things that, I have artists that are on my rotation that are Japanese artists that I
Mm.
never would have thought of listening to prior to having the ability to be exposed to it, which I
Right. Oh
mean,
yeah, totally.
sounds like duh, that's obvious. But, I think it's so great that it's so open now and you can get your hands on really anything
Pretty much.
anywhere at any time. It's like,
Yeah.
it's part of it makes me sad because there was, like, you and I alluded to this in the main show too, like there is something about finding like the big get, like that
Right.
original pressing or like an album of something that's so
Yeah.
cool that you're the first to share. But I just think that it's so interesting to think about. Well, and I think it would be interesting too to find like a Japanese prog rock band. I think of them and their music oftentimes as a culture being like so precise and
Hmm.
so, beautiful. And so it would be amazing to hear like a Japanese prog rock band. Are there any that you know of that are like from Japan?
There, in terms of the mainstream or that like has really surfaced over the last few years, there's not much.
Yeah.
But because of the way they are, and this kind of again, it gets back to the culture. Like they have a very intense interest in outside countries and cultures and language and all of the rest of it. So Japanese language, for people that don't know, is I'm gonna screw this up, but let's say 30% loan or borrowed words. And
Okay.
so like for the first 6 months to a year that I was there, I actually survived by saying like the English word with wa at the end of it. So like I was asking like how do I get to something, and I would just use a really bad Japanese accent because that's what they do. They kind of pull the word and then pronounce it with Japanese characters. So I'd be like toire wa, and they'd be like, oh, this, and off they would go in Japanese and then show me the way to get to the toilet, or I'd like whatever it happens to be. But so they have this fascination with bringing in outside influences. So a lot of the music that they have, even if it's not quote unquote prog rock or prog metal, it really is quite progressive. So like the one that comes to mind immediately is like baby metal, which I'm
Okay.
sure everybody has heard of because they made a humongous splash online a few years ago. Not classic metal, not classic pop, not classic prog, but kind of a mishmash of all of that plus some EDM.
Yeah.
Like it's just this big mishmash of stuff. And yeah, they love that, And if you look at like going back to the anime thing, like Yoko Kanno, who's a jazz composer, a lot of her influences are definitely very, very heavy classic jazz, but she also brings in EDM and beatboxing and some rock and like blues and shuffle and like all these different components that make her composition sound so cool.
I love that. And I think that that's when the magic happens, right? When you're
Oh, totally.
unafraid to like pull in those influences that you love and
Mm,
then mix it up to make something that's totally your own.
yeah.
So anyway, it was like a random question, but it
No,
was
totally. It's
one
a
that
great
from
one.
the moment I looked at your bio, I was like, I have to know like because again, I've been so surprised by some of the music Japanese artists that other guests on the show have brought. It's just surprised
Yeah.
me. And so I was curious to know like specifically about like prog
Yeah.
rock and prog metal, what the feeling was, towards it in
Definitely. Another
Japan.
great band you should check out if you get a chance. They're called Rad Wimps.
Rad Wimps.
Rad
Okay.
Wimps. The lyricist and main songwriter and of course singer for the band speaks really good English. And his lyrics are probably 50-50 Japanese and English.
Okay.
And they make sense. They're not like Japanese English where you're like, what are
Right.
they trying to say? Like he legitimately, and again, it's like this real progressive mishmash of like alt, heavy rock, hard rock, little jazz, little funk, little soul, and rap. And like, it's a really, really interesting blend, and they're a really good band. So if you get a chance, give them a listen.
Perfect. Well, that's exactly what we're looking for in deep tracks. Are some of those bands and songs that maybe our listeners are not as familiar with. So once again, you delivered on all fronts, Nick. Thank you so much for joining me for Deep Tracks.
You're
And
most welcome.
again, to stay informed on all things Super Awesome Mix and what are you listening to, please follow us on Instagram at Super Awesome Mix. Thank you, and we'll be back with some more deep tracks soon.